So, Jake, what are you drinking this week?
Well, this week, you and I kind of talked about it a little bit off air that we were going to both try to do Chilean Carmenères, and I've got a whole bunch of wine, and I thought I had a Carmenère in there. I do have a Chilean, but it's not a Chilean Carmenère. It's a Chilean Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm drinking tonight. It's quite good. It is very different than like your typical, Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's the part of the structure that is missing that makes it very different in my mind than most Cabernets is tannin. It has incredibly soft tannins, but besides that, it's got very fruit forward. This is something I learned in that class I took, that fruit forward wines do tend to be typical of New World. And so it is very fruit forward. It's got a lot of kind of blackberry notes, maybe some dark plum. It's got nice acidity. It also has a lot of spice, which is not like black pepper spice, but like I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's got like a spiciness to it. So very good. It does have tannins, but they're very, very soft and they're kind of understated, which at first made me think it was light bodied. But it's not light. Okay. It's not light bodied. Like once I took another sip and thought about it, I was like, no, it is heavy on my tongue. It's just slippery. And then it kind of it registered what it was missing for a Cab Sauv was tannins. And I was like,
so it's viscous.
Yeah, it's viscous.
It's heavy on the tongue, but in like an oily way almost. Would you describe it as young? Like not necessarily in age, but like in character.
Yeah, probably. It's
because this is something that I'm noticing a lot about, like, especially South American wines, is a lot of times it feels like, and I think this sounds disrespectful, and I don't mean it that way, but that the winemakers are, like, young in their craft a lot of the time. Like, something about the wine seems almost unfinished. Like, they're still learning. That's what I seem to get a lot in a lot of South Americans that I've had.
Well, that's very possible. I mean, this one is from a small producer out there. I don't know a huge amount about it, but it's a Chateau Pairball. I might have actually reviewed this once on the show before because I have a couple of bottles of it.
I think you have.
Yeah, but it's Cabernet Sauvignon 2015. It's the family selection, so they do others. I got this actually from Last Bottle, which is who I got most of my stuff from. I'll go ahead and read you the back label. It says a deliciously complex wine, rich and polished, exhibiting ripe plum, blackberry, and spice, offering flavors of chocolate, which I don't detect chocolate, but the next one I do, and vanilla. It does have a hint of vanilla, which is typical of something that's been oaked. A very complete red wine, elegantly styled and finished with ripe integrated tannins. That, I think, integrated tannins, I'm not sure what that indicates, but it does have tannins, but it's definitely at the end, and since it lists it at the end of the paragraph, I think they knew that. Or at least it's kind of like an afterthought. Oh, it does have tannins, but the rest of it is very well structured. I don't think it's missing anything that makes the structure off. It's just not the in-your-face tannins that I am accustomed to with Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons or the lower-cost Cabernet Sauvignons. There are, some of the more expensive ones that we've had did have much softer tannins, but the tannins were there. It was just better structured. So this one, I think, is structured well as far as the other components of what I would expect from a Cabernet Sauvignon, but the tannins part of it's a little odd. And now, granted, if depending on the price that this was available for, I would buy it again. This on Last Bottle Wines was, I think, $14 a bottle. Totally worth that.
It definitely sounds like a good $14 bottle of wine.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. I think it retails online for $28 a bottle, so it's about 50% off, which is good.
Yeah, half off is good.
Yeah, half off is great. Now it says here the aging process of this wine, first in French oak barrels, and then in the bottle, it gives the character of a wonderful red wine. It is imported into Napa, but it is grown in Chile, in the Central Valley of Chile. 14% alcohol by volume, so very typical New World ABV on that for a Cab Sauv. Very high, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I drink high ABV wines a lot, but you're not going to get something that high out of, Bordeaux, most likely.
You don't often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you sipping on?
Okay, so I also have something out of the Central Valley of Chile, which Chile being such a long country, who knows how long that actually is. So I have a wine I got from Kroger. So I went into Kroger this weekend thinking I hadn't had the El Pastor, or El Pensador, I keep saying Pastor, El Pensador Tempranillo in a couple months. And I thought, $8.99, that sounds really good. I'd like a bottle of that. I knew we were going to be trying to do some ribeyes. I knew we were going to do some deglazing of the wine and mushrooms. And I was like, okay, Tempranillo, the aggressiveness, mushrooms and onions that have been, cooked in a cast iron at a high heat with butter. Like, the aggressiveness of the wine, that's going to go really well. Mm-hmm. So, in the total, or not the total wine, but the Kroger wine section that I go to, the South American and like off reds, like pure non-blended reds, or Spanish like Riojas, and the Spanish Riojas are all kind of in the same area. So I had the Tempranillo in my hand, and I look over and I see a Carmenere, and I see two of them, and this was $10, the one I've got. It was normally $12. They had a 2017 that was less. I think the discount was less on the bottle, if there was a discount at all.
Right.
But it was still more expensive than the one I got. So I have the Connoisseur Bicicleta, or whatever bicycle in Spanish is, Carmenere, limited edition 2012 wine of Chile. So this is like most Carmenere that I've had, very generic red wine flavor, but there's something else there. I had my wife try a sip of the glass that I had open at one point, and she was like, there's like something there, like a spiciness, and then, she said our favorite description, black pepper. Mm-hmm. So it definitely has that on there. I've had the current glass open for quite a while now, and I think that's really kind of muted the flavors, but I've also had, I had 2 beers earlier in the day. This is like kind of my second and a half glass of wine. Don't know how, intoxicated I am there. So the winemaker's note, there's, kind of like how they came up with the name, like the people travel the vineyard on bicycles to do the, do the like clippings and stuff like that. So a velvety Carmenere with strawberry and raspberry mocha, and I think it's, raspberry comma mocha, and licorice aromas together with structured fruity palate. So definitely fruity, definitely structured. Though if you have it open too long, I think it loses a little bit of the structure, just because it, the oxidizing takes over a little bit. But very, very tasty. I get the strawberry, maybe a little bit of the raspberry on the palate. Mocha and licorice, no. But, those are smells that I might not pick up on normally, just because I don't have a super strong sense of smell. But yeah, so what's interesting on the back of the bottle is it's certified carbon neutral delivery, and it's got like a little QR code where you can scan it. I scanned the QR code and it didn't work.
Oh, interesting.
At least not on my phone, but because I was trying to look up a little bit of information, but like when I Googled the name, nothing came up, but like I finally found their website. So I was trying to get us a little bit more information as you were switching over to me. So apparently, they have actually a pretty decent website. It looks pretty nice. Got socials, and like you can learn about the valleys and in the estate. So, I mean, that's pretty nice. For $10, it's not the best bottle of Carmenere that I've ever had, or I've pronounced it 4 different ways this time. But, again, it's one of those bottles that, like, I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
And what I think is really neat is, like, it's got, as we, often talk about having, like, specific, like, licenses, or I'm not getting the right word right now, but like
certifications and stuff. Yeah,
certification, carbon neutral delivery. Like, that's really interesting. That like that's a selling point that they're putting on the bottle. Like, hey, this is a carbon neutral delivery.
Yeah,
I don't know what that means. Is it carbon neutral from Chile to Birmingham, Alabama, where the importer is? Which I thought was interesting. It's imported out of Birmingham, but that kind of makes sense. Thinking like, okay, they truck it up. They say they truck it up, or train, freight train up it from Chile to like the Caribbean and then like put it on a ship to America, like I could see Alabama being a place that would come in that.
Or maybe like they leave a port in Chile and just kind of go up and through the Panama Canal and into Birmingham or something, or even I guess they could. I think isn't there an Atlantic port in Chile? It's just very, very far south.
You know, that might be the case. I think Chile occupies the entire point down there.
Yeah.
So there certainly might be. I think it would be. I don't know. Like I don't know enough about transportation geography down there, but I also don't know if like just because it says it's imported out of a place doesn't mean it doesn't come in like the LA port or something.
Yeah,
like that.
That's true.
So, thinking about it, like if we start a wine importing business, which I think would be fun in its own way, doesn't mean we're going to bring it in through Norfolk or like Houston. Like we could be bringing it in via plane because like that's what made sense. I don't know what the logistics are there. So color, it's very dark, but like when viewed from the side, but if you look down through it, very the garnet, like we were talking last week, very ruby on the back end. 13% alcohol by volume, so it's not super aggressive in that way, but very hot, kind of on the draw, like on the swallow. The acidity's there a bit, but again, because the last glass I had a chance to oxidize for so long, because I had it open for like an hour and a half, really mellowed out. But like that's what's kind of nice about this bottle is like up front it was aggressive, and now that I've let it open up and I poured like another half glass or so while we were talking to kind of get that aggressive-ness again, like it has a lot of character in it for $10, which is nice.
Yeah, well, this is one of the things that I learned. I take wine classes quite a bit, as regular listeners will know. Is I took a wine class on wines of South America, and one of the things that they talked about with both Argentina and Chile is right now they're still kind of discovering their price point, because you can get fairly expensive South American wines that are not at all worth it. And you can also get $10 bottles of South American wine that probably, if they were, if they happen to be grown in Napa or somewhere like that, would be going for $60, $70.
Yeah.
And it's just because the producers, they are not, they've been exporting now for a little while, and they do have some recognition outside of their area. Particularly Argentina is very well recognized for Malbec. But it's kind of like they're still sort of discovering their international market and sort of seeing what works, what price points work. So I've had a couple of Carmenères that were $12 or $13 that I'd swear should be going for $40. And
yeah,
but I've also had some that were $20 or $30 that I was just like, I'm not sure why I bought this.
Yeah, this is one of those wines where 15 to 20 is the price point I would expect to see it at. Really glad to get it at 10.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But, that's kind of the thing with me is also, like, I'm much more the discount wine guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Than you. So, like, my price point is naturally, like, a $15 price point. Not that I won't spend more on a bottle of wine, but, like, one of the things that frustrates me about, spending $40 on a bottle of wine is there's a limit to what my palate can just do because of like just my sense of taste and smell.
Right.
So if you're not there to enjoy it with me, or we're not having my wife's not enjoying it with me as well, like $40 on myself is kind of a bit much at this point. In 10 years, hopefully not, but
right.
For the time being, it's like, okay, $10 on a bottle of wine. Like I don't feel that bad. $20, I haven't had to buy a wine in a long time because of the, not last bottle, but the Groupon wine thing that I got, because I've still been like working on that. And I've got all the wines that we got in Texas, which I haven't opened yet, outside of the Tempranillo that we did last week. So, I've got a lot of wine that I didn't spend a lot of money on. So like my price point is even further lower. It's like, oh, I don't spend anything on wine, when really I do. It's just like I get discount stuff. Now, I also got another wine while I was there, and I honestly don't remember what it was. I think I got a Tempranillo.
Oh, okay.
Because right now, if you live near a Kroger marketplace, in the summer, at least at the one I go to, they're always doing the wine clear out. So they have all the, like, in their clearance section, they have a bunch of extra wines. So, whereas they normally have, like, a small clearance section in the wine place, but they've been, like, rotating, I guess, through a back stock or something, which has been great for me because it's look through and see interesting stuff and see, you know, bottles that they don't normally have.
Right.
Or bottles I don't normally see because I really only kind of look at that Spanish red and exotic red area, and then occasionally in the whites because normally I'll go to Total Wine. But I mean, I think it's been 4.5 months since I've been in Total Wine.
Okay.
Actually, no, it was. I think the last time I went to Total Wine, I bought cigars.
Oh, interesting.
And looked at wine briefly. And got cigars.
I don't know. Like I go if ever I'm over there because there's a TJ Maxx and a Marshalls over there, or no, TJ Maxx and Home Goods. And so if my wife ever wants to go over to TJ Maxx or Home Goods, like a lot of times I'll try to work in just going and looking. Yeah. And just because, you know, I've got so much right now that I'm not really that interested in buying more. Well, I am interested, but I'm not going to. And I kind of just like browsing. Like I like to go through and look around and scan things and see what, you know, what's what, and just I'm just interested in it. Like, you know, like, oh, what's this? And, you know.
Yeah, my biggest problem with going to Total Wine is I know I'm missing the more exotic stuff that they have because they all have just a random shipment of exotic stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I can only ever find, like, the basic whites, the basic reds, and, you know, like talking to Jackson and talking to you and kind of knowing more about, like, South, you know, the West, you know, the different banks of the Bordeaux and those sort of things. Like, I know in the French section there's plenty of, like, different stuff that I could get.
Right.
But I'm still kind of on that point of, like, I really do like experiencing a specific grape. And I'm still kind of stuck in that place where I'm like, I don't know the grapes well enough to be like, oh, this is happening with this blend. And
right.
I understand that, like, even the most advanced winemakers can get that wrong, and I'm not expecting to be like, oh, because they've included 5% Petit Verdot, this is happening. Like, because you never know for sure. But that's the thing that, for me, like, I still like knowing, like, oh, this is this specific grape varietal, because I like to imagine, like, I'm going to remember what that's like when I go to a bottle that has, like, 50-50 blend or something.
Yeah.
Now,
well,
like,
you know,
50-50 blend, Merlot, Cab, Sauv, I know what that's going to be.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, and the thing too about it is, like, I don't think there's a problem with getting a single grape. And then the other issue that's complicated that a lot of, you know, the listeners may have experienced this, or they are curious about it a little bit, is when you start getting into European wines, even with whites, a lot of times they're not called what the grape is. So they're still called the region. So, like, I mean, if you're getting, you know, a white from, you know, what are the white grapes of Champagne? The white grapes of Champagne are going to be, I think, I'm going to totally draw the blank. Chardonnay is one, and I want to say that Sauvignon Blanc is the other, but I could be totally wrong on that. But I think Chardonnay is one of them. And so, and same thing with, like, I think, like, if you go down to Burgundy, the white, if you get a white Burgundy, it's Chardonnay, you know?
Yeah, so, like, Pinot Noir, Pinot...
Yeah, and same thing with...
Chardonnay, Point Blanc, Gris, Petit Monsieur, Arbelaine. Yeah.
But same thing with Burgundy is if you're getting a Burgundy and it's red, it's most likely mostly Pinot Noir, if not all Pinot Noir. So, you know, that's one of those things that's kind of makes it a little bit more complicated. But at the same time, like, when I recommend somebody if they want a summer sipper that's a white, you know, I think Sauvignon Blanc is a great summer sipper, but it's going to be a little grassier. It's going to have a lot of those citrus notes and stuff like that, but it's going to have a little bit of grassiness, and I find that interesting. It reminds me a lot of, like, a good cider. But part of my problem with whites in general is they all remind me of cider, and so I might as well just have a cider.
Well,
except, you know, I've had a few that are not like that, and actually, since I've been taking those other classes, it's starting to get a little bit expanded a little bit more. The high acidity in whites tends to, I wouldn't say turn me off, but it's just something about it where I'm just like, this is just not really what I want.
Well, it's a different type of aggressiveness in whites. Where, to me, like, a lot of the aggressiveness in a red is the tannins, in my opinion. You do occasionally have some that have high acidity or, kind of some offness.
Well, I mean, even Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is a highly acidic wine. It's just has other structure with it that I enjoy, whereas a lot of whites that are highly acidic, they don't have those other things that I like.
Well, I think it's also the sugar there. Because it's like,
well, I mean, there are dry white wines. It's just,
there are, but that's the thing is like the ones I think you're talking about, like Chardonnay and
even Chardonnay is dry. It's just that it can be dry. It's just
that everybody keeps telling me Chardonnay is dry, and in my general experience, it's not.
Yeah,
but I also don't drink a lot of more exotic Chardonnays. I drink cheap Chardonnays when I drink them. And I found them to be more enjoyable, but like Pinot Grigio, you can get a sweet Pinot Grigio, but you're generally getting much more acidity. And with Riesling, because of the scale, depending on where you're getting the Riesling from, like if you're getting a German Riesling, like you're going to definitely see a lot more of the scale matter. Whereas like a lot of American Rieslings, it's kind of like, oh, it's semi-sweet, and you're like, this is really acidic. And you're like, oh, it's semi-sweet, and you're like, is this Gewürztraminer? Like,
right.
What is this?
Yeah. And that's true. And Riesling is one of the few when it's dry, because there's a range of sweetness when it comes to them. But dry Rieslings I enjoy, and as you know, I like Viognier, and I like Albarino. And Albarino does tend to be a little bit sweeter, but there's other characteristics of it that I think kind of make up for it and make it more enjoyable to me.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's kind of weird about Gewürztraminer, like one of the things I find really odd about that one is like, the really dark porters and stuff that I like, the heavier alcohol ones, they have that kind of like oil, like mouth structure.
Yeah,
like some like a less than chilled Gewürztraminer has that to it.
Yeah.
Where you're like, this feels like it should be a really, really dark beer. And it's like pea gold.
Right,
like,
right.
It to be disgusting about it. But like, it's just like a different level. So like, I kind of get with like, at least for me, most reds have a mouthfeel and a structure that you would expect with red wine. Kind of the generic structure to it. Some of the whites, you're like, wait a minute, like this is not what I was expecting. When you look at that glass, you're like, oh, it's this should be light and crisp, and you're like, this isn't crisp at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's super sweet, and then you have like a Gewürztraminer, and you're like, that looks like light beer, and thinking it'll be kind of light, and it's very oily almost.
Right.
Like I don't have a better description for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it for our wines this week. You wanna get into our topic, or I mean, so you and I
let's do a mid-episode plugs.
Okay.
So, you can always follow us at tastinganarchy.com. You can follow us on Twitter, where Jacob riles the state, promotes Schulderberg and our other ventures. We're Tasting Anarchy on Twitter. You can send us an email at tastinganarchy@gmail.com. We're on YouTube. We have a Reddit that is unrelated to us, but related to us. Reddit.com/r/Childerberg, where if you're interested in Childerberg, you want to know about Childerberg, you want to see anything about Childerberg, go there, send us some information, reach out. We're both active on that. I think you and I have commented on every post that has been posted there.
At this point, I think that at this point it's just mostly you and me.
At this point, probably that's true. But if you're listening to this show and you haven't been to Childerberg.com since June, 1st or so, or since
June, say June 15th.
Yeah, June 15th. We have a new shirt out. We are fundraising for the next Schulterberg. We are trying to make it cost neutral as possible to those of us who contribute financially to it, i.e. Jacob. But yeah, so we have a really awesome shirt design, courtesy of Jacob. So that's one of those ones where like, hey, just If you're interested in a shirt, you're not able to make it, pick one up. If you have a friend who can't make it, pick them up one for them. They are limited edition. Once we sell, I think the magic number is 100.
Yes, that's right.
They are gone.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop production at either 100 or I think September 1st, and I will be switching to a different logo that will last until we start doing official attending Childeberg Dose shirts.
Dos Vidania.
Yeah, Dos Vidania. Well, and actually, on the note of shirts, there are also baby sizes and
Oh, that's where I was going next.
Oh, okay. And then one more thing, I happen to be wearing at this moment the Ringer shirt of the new ones because I got it today and I put it on so I could talk about it a little bit on the show. Mm-hmm. It is a really well-fitting shirt. I like it a lot. I am 6'5" and about 200 pounds. It is a large what I'm wearing. The large is large. It's a little bit big on me, and I'm a large person, so they do run slightly large, but it's very comfortable.
It hasn't been washed and dried.
That's true. It hasn't been washed and dried, and it's very comfortable. I think the way that it is, but just if you've attended Childeberg or you see me on Twitter or you see me on Instagram. I am a big man, and but I'm a thin man as well.
Yeah. So Jacob, Childeberg wine van shirt, tie dye. I have an extra large, and I have a large. I pretty much fit large now comfortably.
Yeah.
And I don't really fit the large very comfortably. The extra large I fit perfect.
Right.
What size are you in the tie dye?
Also large, but it's a little baggy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
and that's been pre-shrunk actually. So
and those kind of ran small.
Yeah.
So this makes me think this runs kind of true to. Well, if that's baggy, then this large is actually probably not that big.
Yeah.
But so what I would say is, order if you have any concerns, order one size up, and run it through a couple cycles in the dryer if it's too big.
Yeah.
If it's perfect, hey, don't put it in the dryer. I don't put my shirts in the dryer if I can avoid it, but that's just me because I'm weird.
It's also very soft. Like I like it a lot. It's a nice shirt.
Yeah,
so.
I wasn't disappointed with the first Childeberg shirts.
Yeah,
they just weren't as soft upon arrival as I was hoping.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I wonder if that's from. I don't know if it's from because like when I don't know if you've tie dyed before.
Oh, I understand the process. I've not done it.
Okay, yes.
So yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of both.
Right. But anyways, these are really nice shirts. I like them a lot.
They are.
They're available as in the Ringer shirts. Like I don't know if you guys know what a Ringer shirt is. How would you describe it, Mason? It's got like a different color ring on the collar and the sleeves.
So if any of you remember the Vote for Pedro shirts from Napoleon Dynamite, where it's a white shirt with red writing, but it has the collar and the cuff is a red. These are black with white main body. So very 80s kind of camp counselor look. I think they look really good. The logo is particularly good. So yeah, definitely a really nice shirt.
Yep. But if you're not cool with the Ringer style, we also just have plain white T-shirts with the logo.
Yeah. So, and there is one. So in the kit, in the toddler and baby size, it's 24 month and under.
Yeah.
There is a black shirt.
Right. That's right.
And it's the only one.
Yeah.
So
well, I've been thinking about it because people commented on it. They were like, "Hey, can I get a different color like the toddler one?" You commented on it, and a couple people on Twitter also. I've been thinking about maybe running a couple of other colors, but still limiting it to 100 shirts total because
no, those like what I would say is at this point, the bridge shirt. The one that's going to run after this, that will have a different color. If we're going to do another, if that will lend itself to another color palette, then that one, because at this point, so for those people who are going to be attending the full Childeberg Dose event, it's 4 days. So if you attended Childeberg 1, you have a wine van shirt.
Yeah.
You have a Investigate Childeberg, because that's the title of the current shirt. You'll have the bridge shirt, and you could have a Childeberg Dose shirt. So there's 4 shirts you could have for the event.
That's right.
So I think keeping it kind of in that range, because for those who don't understand, these cost money.
That's right.
So if it would be different if somebody was saying like, look, I'm going to order 10 black variants and put the money up for them. But otherwise, like, you know, oh, we have a different color available. It's like, okay, well, were you willing to buy the first one if I didn't?
Yeah.
Oh, think about it. Well, then you're not going to buy a black one.
Right.
Well, you know, let's use some of our former boss's logic where it's like, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered otherwise.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's just kind of covering that. So I believe we owe some shout outs to some people. As always, we shout out the Friends Against Government podcast, the Fagcast, Bird and Bird and Carr.
Yeah.
They are our co-Childebergians in their own ways. We will hopefully be having a appearance by a fleeting bird at some point.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying some homemade kombucha or something like that, depending on who you're talking to. And we all have that, so we'll be able to talk about it together. Carr has been on the podcast, and we enjoyed his wine mix. So, and, you know, we'll get to meet Carr in person for those who hadn't. I have, and you see him not frequently.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
often than
fairly
pretty much anyone else in the Liberty movement.
Yeah, I mean, we see each other maybe once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then there's like Sounds Like Liberty, Nikki P and his wife Lizzie. If you want your dose of music and very wide-ranging and very interesting, set of music, you always check those guys out. We both have been on the show. They haven't been on our show necessarily, but I don't think either of them particularly drink, so that's a little harder to kind of set up. Then there's always Mr. Sue, who we have obviously had on our show, and is a Childeberg attendee himself. And then Peaceful Treason, those guys, a wonderful shout out to both of us. Apparently I look like a guy who would be good at cornhole, which I think is hilarious. They have a very interesting, it's kind of like a libertarian news show, but like a deep dive on like an issue. Yeah. Is kind of the way I would describe it. And they're both, great guys in person, wonderful dog, and just a lot of fun. So yeah, those are our kind of.
All right. Anarchy Inc., the one that we were on with Anarcho Coffee Guy. Anarchy.
Anarcho Inc.
Anarcho Inc. That's right.
Yeah, that I can't believe I nearly left that out. Just a fantastic show and company. So I don't know if it's still good, but if you do tasting 10 on Anarcho coffee, you can enjoy a 10% discount possibly still. I don't know how long that will run, but if it's still up and operational, get in on that, because that'll definitely help them out, and let them know that you were listening to us. And then let's see.
I'm sure we're missing people, but let's move on.
Well, I mean, like Dino Files.
Oh, Dino, yeah. Let's continue though, because we've spent
me and I'm you.
Yeah, I mentioned that to him and he thought it was pretty funny. But we've been talking about plugs for 5 minutes, so let's move on to more, I guess, wine and personal. This thing is, you and I talked about this a little bit before. Is I didn't prepare. I've been super busy the last week or so, and have been
preparing a motorcycle for.
Well, yeah, I started working
motorcycling.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So, So one of the reasons I got the motorcycle was to have kind of an interesting way of driving around Texas and seeing Texas, and a good excuse to just sort of drive places. Because it's for people who have motorcycles, I'm sure they know this. I had one. Well, I had a scooter briefly when I was for about a year, maybe a little more than a year, when I was younger, and I did like riding it. The thing I didn't like riding about it was that it was so slow on any main road. Mm-hmm. And it took forever to get up to speed, and it was just an uncomfortable way to ride with other people who are going at normal speeds. So, I was talking to Victoria about it a little bit after Childeberg, and she was like, "Well, get it." And you know how I am, so I was like, "Oh,
right, your wife tells you to do something, you do it."
Well, basically, she tells me to do something, and like I see that, oh, that's a green light, and then 2 weeks later, I've got a motorcycle, and
yes.
So, but one of the reasons was to see Texas, and it's a good way for me to get around and go to the wineries and just, shake hands, introduce myself, maybe get some interviews. I will probably not be doing wine tastings on the motorcycle because it'll make me too nervous. But I do think that the areas are really nice, and I would have no problem going down and just stopping at the wineries, walking around, talking to people, seeing things, maybe buying a couple of bottles, and then moving on to the next one, just to try to get me around. For the listeners who listen for a long time, they know that I'm trying to kind of move my way up in the ranks of being in the wine world, so through certification and through just shaking hands. And I thought this would be kind of a fun and memorable way to get around. It's a very interesting bike. It's a 1984 Honda VF 700, and they're a little unusual. They're a little bit older, and for people who know bikes, they would recognize it as being kind of an unusual bike. But it's also not an expensive bike, so it's not like people would be like, "Oh my gosh, he's got money" or anything. It's just it's a cheap bike.
It's also 3 years older than either of us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an old bike. So, but it runs pretty well, and I've been doing work on it and stuff. So that's been occupying a lot of my time. But one of the things that you and I were talking about before the show was just the amount of governmental red tape for me to be able to ride a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there was this much when I got my driver's license. I just don't recall.
I think the process is a lot smoother
with a car
because it's like, so I don't know about you, but like I delayed getting my license, like just because I was lazy about it and I was terrified of driving.
Oh, okay.
So I delayed getting my license for a while, but basically I took driver's ed, and driver's ed like basically covered all the prerequisites to just go in and take my test.
Yeah.
Now getting my permit and all that stuff took a while, and then you're supposed to log all these hours and all that nonsense. But I don't think anybody ever checked any of that crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, like from what I understand, like because I had a friend when I went to NC State, he bought a motorcycle kind of like on a whim.
Yeah.
And bought I think it was a 30-year-old bike at the time too, and this was 10 plus years ago. And he kind of like. He got his license, but like he had to go out someplace, and it was like in some parking lot. It was just a different process, and it wasn't as well documented.
Yeah.
Because 10, 15, 20 years ago, like everybody got a license.
Yeah.
That could drive.
Right.
Basically. So like, there was all these many market alternatives to make getting a license easier.
Right.
Whereas, what is it? Like one, like let's just call it half of 1% of people get a motorcycle license.
Yeah. I mean, even around here, which is apparently, according to the internet, a fairly easy state to ride a motorcycle in, I don't actually see that many.
Well, I saw a lot.
I see a lot parked here all the time.
Well, I saw a lot, I thought, on the road from Dallas to the Lake Buchanan and Lake Buchanan back. But I think what I was noticing was the fact that there were so many people riding without helmets.
That's true.
And that bothered me
the helmet laws here, I guess, are that if you're over 21, you don't have to wear a helmet, which I don't want to get into the whole argument about this because I've gotten into this with the bicycle argument and stuff with a lot. There's arguments for both sides. To me, it seems insane to ride a bicycle or a motorcycle without a helmet when you're riding with cars. And
I agree to a point, because I never intend to use a bicycle as a means of conveyance where I want to get somewhere.
Yeah, and I guess that's different. I used to ride it to work once in a while.
Yeah, I like the idea of getting a bicycle and riding around my neighborhood and driving to other people's neighborhood with the bicycles and just seeing a neighborhood that way.
Right.
I don't want to go onto a street. And that's one of the things that like frustrates my wife and I about you getting a motorcycle is we don't think you are irresponsible. We think everybody with cars are.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's definitely a risk. I mean, that's one of those things is that, I mean, you do have to. So one of the things you and I talked about is the very first step to getting a license in Texas is you have to take this long online course. I think I told you it was 5 or 6 hours. I think it's like 3. I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's all timed. You can't skip ahead and just do the quizzes and all that sort of stuff, which I tend to be better at just like reading a book and then doing the quiz. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is like you're watching all of these videos where they're telling you stuff like, what's the problem with this picture? And it's like a guy like riding backward on his motorcycle, picking his nose or something like that. And you're like, There's lots of
Everything.
things. Yeah, everything's wrong with this. Like, he's an idiot. But, like, it's just one of those things where it's you're taking it and you're kind of like, ugh, like, this is annoying. But it's clearly, to me, the government doing some crony shit because there's only one of these courses you can take. It's provided by a private company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only one that's certified, to my knowledge. And it may be that maybe the company that I'm doing my behind the handlebars tests and stuff like that with, because I haven't driven in such a long time on a bike that I'm a little bit nervous about it. And I also I had a automatic before. This is a manual, so I just want a little bit of extra help and just to get used to it and a place where I can ride for a couple of hours safely without anybody messing with me, and just remember how to do it.
That's the thing that I've always wondered, and not to derail the conversation.
Yeah.
But like one of the things that's always stopped me from trying to ride a motorcycle is I'm not good. Like we had a friend who tried to teach me to drive a stick shift.
Yeah.
And I couldn't pull it off.
Really?
And yeah, it was just, well, he had a Ford Focus with like a weird clutch. So like, I don't know how much of that is him just not being a good teacher, me not feeling it. Like I was a bad student learning to drive a car. I don't particularly think I'm a bad driver. I recognize that I'm not as good a driver as I used to think I was. But I recognize that about myself. I was not a good student learning to drive a car. Oh. So to me, like a manual car always seemed like one of those things where like maybe because I was always worried about damaging it. Okay. As opposed to put it in drive and then let go of the brake. And then if you need to stop, put on the brake. Right. To me, I understand, you could shift into neutral pretty much any time, put on the brake, but that's just an extra step between me and stopping. Okay. So one of the things I've always wondered about motorcycles is, are there actually automatic motorcycles? And then you say that, and I'm like, well, no crap. Yeah. I should have known.
Yeah. There are. I guess, so the course that I'm taking, they teach you on a manual, because most, I guess, are manuals. All of my first cars, I didn't have an automatic car until I think the Explorer, yeah, which was the car I had before the one I have now. And so, my first, and the thing too is I drove without a license for a long time when I was a kid, and my parents didn't really care. They were like, "Well, you're not going that far; it's fine, and you're not going on the freeway." And I also I bought my first car when I was 14 for $250, and they were like, "Well, it's a little Honda Civic. We call it the Zombie." And I had to open the sunroof and stick my head out in order to fit. It was such a tiny car. And they were just like, yeah, we don't really care, as long as you're just kind of in the neighborhoods and stuff like that around our area. And so I would drive it to work, and I would come, I worked 3 or 4 blocks away, not very far. And so I just drive it around to, where we used to have the libertarian meetings before it got moved to Pembroke. Mm-hmm. So that I worked in that shopping center. So I would just drive it over there when the weather was bad, and I would walk when the weather was good. Or I'd ride my bike if the weather was good. And I had it for a while until they made me give it to my sister, and she didn't know how to drive a stick. And so she ruined the clutch. And so my $250 car was gone. And paperweight. Yeah. So we gave it, but I think that's the first car I gave to Eccleston Services. And then I gave 2 other cars to Eccleston Services.
Well, what's really funny about that? Yeah. Is a clutch is not a hard thing to replace in a Honda Civic.
It's not, but it was a $250 car, and I wanted a truck. So I bought a truck for $400.
Well, and that's the thing that so there's several points here. Yeah. One, when you told me you were getting a motorcycle, I was like, I thought this mofo wanted a truck. Yeah. And so I was like, hey, what's the most impractical thing if you want a truck?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. Logical. And I was like, I bet his wife thinks he'd look hot on a motorcycle, and that's the only reason he's getting a motorcycle.
That's also part of it. That's also part of it.
That was my second response, and I was like, all right, the motorcycles that he'll actually fit on, he'll look ridiculous because he's not a biker. Yeah. And those are kind of the only motorcycles that you'd fit on. This is one of those things for people who don't understand, 1, inflation. 2, the idea after Cash for Clunkers that there's a $400 car. Yeah. And it, got a $250 car, and that car could reasonably have kept going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For quite a while. yes, there could have been the transmission fell out the next week. When you bought a $250 car back in the early 2000s, you knew you were buying a $250 car.
Yeah.
If you bought a $250 car today, it wouldn't move.
Right.
And this is less than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You could have bought a $250 car that would have gotten you to and from work. And this is the thing that, here people are always arguing about, oh, we need the light rail.
Yeah.
We need to lose money on this. It's like, well, if the government hadn't destroyed all those cars and made all these other bizarre standards that, messed up the market, you could have a $10,000 brand new car that in 3 years would have depreciated to the fact that you could sell it for less than $1,000.
Yeah. Well, sort of on that point, one of the, because I look on Craigslist a lot, and I've talked about this a little bit off air as well. I look on Craigslist a lot, and I look on the Facebook Marketplace just to see what's available. Mm-hmm. And there's been multiple times where I've almost gone out and bought a 1983 Ford Ranger because I think I can do most of the work on them. And actually having this motorcycle reminded me of this, how much I like to do work on things.
Yeah, if you're going to buy a car from the 80s, get a diesel.
Okay, that's not a bad suggestion.
Yeah, because most of the diesel stuff you can fix.
Yeah. But
most of the 80s electronics and a gas engine I think are going to be just more trouble than they're worth.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, the other thing, so this is Jacob nostalgia. When I was a kid, my dad had a car that we called the Great Pumpkin. Mm-hmm. It was a 1967 Chevy. Man, what was their pickup truck back then called? I can't remember what it was, but it was a Chevy pickup side. It had the step side. Man, it was a cool.
The sideboards.
Yeah, it was a freaking sweet truck, and he ended up getting rid of it and buying a VW Golf because it was. Now, imagine this in 1988, probably 1988. No. I was old enough to remember the Great Pumpkin, so it must have been 1990 or 1991. So
yeah, you'd be 4. So
yeah, and I remember when I was 4. I remember because I remember moving into my grandma's house and helping move all that stuff. I remember that age, and I remember living in Roseville, and we moved out of Roseville when I was 3. Mm-hmm. So I have very distinct memories of it. Actually, I remember playing on the top of the VW Golf in Roseville, so we must have got it in 1990. Because I remember it was new, and my mom came out and was like, "Why are you playing on the new car?" But it was an old VW Golf. It was like an '84 or something like that, and that car lasted forever. It was sweet. But my parents got it because the Chevy was not a kid's. It was not a family friendly vehicle, but a VW Golf somehow was.
Well,
it was a coupe.
I could see a VW Golf having seatbelts.
That's true.
In the back seat.
Yeah, and the Chevy had no back seat, so I recall riding in it. And when we would go to church, I would sit on my mom's lap, Janie would sit in the middle, and my dad would drive. So we were all crammed in the Chevy and just driving along. I have weird when I talk about this, to me, this sounds so unsafe, but it sort of shows you. I mean, it probably is unsafe, but it's sort of the sinister nature of the government is they've kind of drilled it into us that you're only safe if you're in these behemoths of machine that are probably heavier than that Chevy was. And but what is it that Eric Peters always talks about where he's for every that they require these fuel standards, but then they also make your car 2 tons heavier than it used to be. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, and that's and that's what I would say is the Chevy probably had a column shift, so it's not like your sister was in the way of the shifter,
right?
Because your dad's it's probably a column shift.
Yeah, I think it was 3 on the tree. So
so 3 on the tree, and then I bet I'm betting the church was probably less than 5 miles away.
Oh, I'm sure. Actually, I think it was the one in Roseville. I think we walked to it most of the time. So if it was bad weather, we would all pile in the truck.
Yeah, and that's the thing is yes, it's probably I will say just inherently, it's not good to have your kid in the your kid on the lap and whatnot. Yeah. But while this is a super fascinating conversation, I actually have to cut the episode short because something's going on with my daughter.
Okay.
So everybody stay free. Jake, if you want to roll out some other audio to it, to close it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk.
I'll get you mine, and we'll go from there.
Yep, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this article, and then we'll go. So I'll see you later, man. Have a good night.
See you, man. You too.
Bye. All right, everybody. So Mason had to had to leave real quick because his daughter's crying in the background there, and he's a good dad, so he's taking care of that. What I wanted to talk about, and this is wine related, is a recent Supreme Court decision. And I'm kind of two minds in this decision, and that is because I don't really think the federal government should be telling people what to do and what not to do, but at the same time, I want to be able to buy wine across state borders. So this case we've actually talked about earlier in the series in our show, and it's Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailer Association versus Thomas. And basically, the gist of the story is that Tennessee has some kind of odd requirements that like if you want to have a wine retail location, you have to live in the state for a certain amount of time. And so this has been challenged, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the challengers. And so what does this mean? It means that possibly you'll be able to buy wine across state borders. So if you guys are not subscribers to Wine for Normal People, she does offer some very interesting insight into a lot of these things. She's going to have Thomas Work from the National Association of Wine Retailers on to make sure that people understand what this reading means. But the gist of it is that, and I think I kind of gave you guys the gist already, but the SCOTUS recognizes that the Commerce Clause of the Constitution applies to alcohol as well. And that means that you're allowed to sell alcohol across state borders and that you can't have residency requirements for selling alcohol. Those are silly. Now, on the one hand, Tennessee, this is obviously cronyism in Tennessee. They made these laws because they're requiring people to be in the state because they want to limit the number of retailers, which means that the existing retailers can make more money. It's just kind of simple economics. But on the other hand, some states may want to live it in a different way, and the federal government really shouldn't impose their views on those states. So, for example, this is a very common libertarian argument is abortion rights. Now, New York has very, very, very liberal abortion rights, and Alabama recently severely restricted abortion rights. Now, culturally speaking, Alabama and New York are completely different places. Why should they be under the same law? Now, abortion is an incredibly contentious subject. We don't really like bringing up things like that on the show because first of all, it's not really very productive to have those arguments. But Mason and I have a opinion on that is very nuanced and unusual. And if you want to look up what we believe in, it's the Walter Block evictionism theory, and I think it's logically sound. But not all libertarians agree with that. Not all people agree with that. So why can't Alabama live a certain way and New York live a different way? And on that same note, why can't Tennessee require people to live in the state to sell alcohol, and New York maybe allows people to, or actually New Jersey is a good example of this. New Jersey allows a lot of sales across borders, and it's not a problem. Texas is a little bit more restrictive, but not as restrictive as other places. So to me, this is kind of like, it's a little bit of them overstepping their bounds, but at the same time, like I like to buy wine and stuff like that, and I would like it to be able to be shipped where I want to get it. So I'm hoping this does open up Texas a little bit because there are some restrictions for Texas, but on the other hand, I don't know if growth of federal power is a good thing. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Once again, go ahead and check us out on Tasting Anarchy on Twitter, tastinganarchy@gmail.com if you want to message us. I still have some koozies from Childeberg 1 left, so if you do a review on your favorite podcatcher and email me a screenshot of that review, I will send you a koozie. I sent out the first group of those, I guess yesterday or the day before. I can't remember which. I think it was yesterday. So those who left reviews, thank you very much, and you should be receiving them soon. I guess until next time, stay free, everybody.